Welcome to Trion's Realm. In our journey to revisit all the classic Zelda games, next up in the journey is one of the biggest games in the entire series, just from an impact standpoint. Much like how Final Fantasy VII is kind of a big entry point for a lot of fans in the series, even though there were 6 games and multiple spin-offs beforehand. Similar thing here where Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. This game, when it came out in 1998, was like a seismic shift in the industry. This game was endlessly anticipated, and it was one of those few games that really did live up to the hype for many people. I was there day one for this bad boy. I remember doing the midnight launch. It was at my local mall, and my buddy drove me over. We waited in line. Man, people were hyped beyond belief for this game. Now this is my original copy from 1998. When they initially released it, this was the collector's edition. As you can see, it had like a special foil cover to it, and in a throwback to the old classic Zeldas on the NES, they went with a golden cartridge. Now, you will see later versions of this on the gray cartridge, probably more common at this point to see that one, but yes, they did do the gold, and it still looks beautiful even today. Now, it should be noted that there are some small changes even between the physical versions. Early release versions, there were 2 small things that were noticeably different between the early versions and later versions. One of the first things is that Ganondorf, when you were fighting him, he actually chokes up red blood, whereas in later versions, if I remember correctly, it was switched to green blood. Another thing is that the Fire Temple in earlier versions it was a chant that ran during the soundtrack, and I can't remember the full details, but I want to say it was a stock sound, but I believe it was some sort of Middle Eastern chant and not a good look, so Nintendo went and removed that from later versions of the game. But those are some small differences. The red blood, it's moot. The chants, I will say, if you've played the game and you played as much as I did when it first came out, it does feel distinctly different when you play it again later and it doesn't have those chants in it. That doesn't make it unplayable. It's just one of those oddities where it sounds weird to your ears when you're so used to it one way versus another. This game had such an impact on the industry, everything from the 3D adventure genre to Z targeting. Now, for me personally, I absolutely love this game, but some of the impact of it was a little bit more muted on me than others because the N64 was my primary system at the time, and early in 1998, before this came out, I want to say it was around April or May of that year, Konami released Mystical Ninja starring Goemon, an absolute hidden gem of a game on that system. I played it endlessly to this day. It's still one of my all-time favorite N64 titles. And that game is literally a 3D Zelda game. While it has some platforming, its action-adventure elements are way more in line with the Zelda series than it is with, say, something like Mario 64. It's got an absolutely bizarre sense of humor, and it is one I would absolutely recommend anybody play. But part of the reason why this was a little muted on me was with the exception of the Z targeting, which, don't get me wrong, I love Z targeting. Pretty much everything that this did, that one had done as well. But any way you slice it, they are both excellent, amazing action-adventure games that should be both played on the original N64 if possible. Now, when it comes to playing the game, personally, I always prefer physical. So you do have the original N64 version. As I said, there are 2 different cartridge variations in a similar way that there were 2 cartridge variations of the NES games. And this is absolutely an excellent way to play it, especially on a classic N64 controller. It has gotten multiple re-releases throughout the years, kicking things off in one of the best pre-order bonuses in history. Nintendo released, it was a standalone disc. I unfortunately don't have that version anymore. I just have the double pack here. But they released the Ocarina of Time Master Quest disc. What that was if you pre-ordered Wind Waker, they gave you Ocarina of Time as well as the unreleased Master Quest, which was essentially rearranged dungeons So you go back through and some of the puzzles and navigation are a little bit more difficult, but it is still the same core game. It's more like a remix mode to it, but they had released it, had its own standalone instruction book for it. It was fully ported over and fully playable on the GameCube. Now, I will say that playing on the GameCube feels a little weird because obviously the controller layout is a bit different than what you're used to, especially if you played as much of the N64 version as I did. But it is still fully playable and it is a great way to experience it. It also runs in 480i and also 480p. It does run in progressive. So it is one of the better looking ways to play the original Ocarina of Time. And as you can see here, don't remember how, I think this was a bundle that was included when you bought certain GameCube systems, where they would give you both Wind Waker and its bonus disc as a freebie. When they initially did it and you pre-ordered this one, you did get a full cover art and case and everything just for this version. That's probably going to be the one that you're going to see because that one is far more common than this 2-pack variation. Now, let's say you missed out on that when it comes to the GameCube. They also had the collector's edition, just like I talked about with Zelda 1 and 2. They also had Ocarina of Time on here, and it's essentially the same version of Ocarina of Time that's on here. The big difference is you don't get Master Quest in this collection. You only get the vanilla Ocarina of Time version. Great way to experience it. Again, it's pretty much an identical version of the standalone Ocarina of Time that was in the other collection. Now, when it comes to experiencing Ocarina of Time in the best way possible, as it stands right now, the only way to go is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. Now, unfortunately, they've shut down the digital storefront, so you can no longer buy it that way. But if you can get a hold of a cartridge, they're not too terribly expensive right now. I can't say that won't change in the future, but this is still the best version of the game as far as I'm concerned. This gives you essentially everything that you could need. The dual screen setup is absolutely amazing. One of the best things about it is, like for example, in the water temple, you have to switch the iron boots on and off many times throughout that stage. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt in the original. You kind of just got used to it, but you have to go into the pause menu, select them, equip them, and then take them back off, and you had to do that endlessly. Here with the touchscreen, you can literally assign it to that and just tap that as you're playing, turning it on and off. The water dungeon in particular, that one has been redesigned ever so slightly to make it not nearly as cryptic as it was in the original. Personally, I experienced that one firsthand. I went to visit some family out in Ohio, didn't have a strategy guide, and I got to the water temple. There, we didn't have internet. I was lost for the better half of a week trying to figure that one out. Anybody who knows, you know. That area is a real pain in the butt if you don't know what you're supposed to do. The gyro aiming, the persistent map, pretty much anything you could throw at it in terms of, the 3D display, everything is just so much better in this version of the game. One of the nice things that they did was when they went back and redid it, all of the character models were designed to look identical to their artwork from the game. So the artwork that was made for the N64 version, the 3DS version actually looks like that. And it looks insanely good. It runs well, and one of the coolest features is you also have the full Master Quest in here. You could choose between the original or the Master Quest, and what they did with the Master Quest, they actually mirror the entire world. So on top of it being a bit tougher, with the dungeon remixes and the layouts and everything, they also mirror the world to kind of throw you for a bit of a loop. Any way you slice it, if you're going to experience Ocarina of Time and you have the option, this is the route to go. Whether it's a regular 3DS, a 3DS XL, personally, if you're going to experience head tracking, my recommendation is to have a new 3DS, since the head tracking 3D is much nicer than trying to hold it steady when you're playing the original. Now, when it comes to some extra stuff, as you just saw, Nintendo did release a guide for this one. It's one of their official ones from Nintendo Power. I personally found Nintendo Power guides to be some of the best ones for Nintendo-specific games. They seem to have the most information. Their flavor text was the best. They got a lot of the official artwork. It's just a great companion to play through the game with. This is a great little bit of extra stuff to throw in there if you're a collector like myself. Not particularly needed nowadays because Game Facts and YouTube, you can find pretty much anything that you're stuck on, you can find on there. I just personally like the experience of having a guide next to you. It's kind of like having a journal next to you when you're experiencing the adventure. Now, there is another option for experiencing Ocarina of Time. If you've played this game 100 times, like many fans have, and you're looking for a new experience, let's say you've gone through the 3D version, you've gone through the GameCube, the N64, and you want something a little bit different, then you can go with the 2-part manga. Much like any of the others in this line, this is not a canonical retelling of the story. The same beats get you to the same spots. There are additional characters added in. They've done this for a lot of games in the series. The artwork is absolutely beautiful. The stories are fun. They add in more characterization to Link as well as a lot of the other characters. So if you're looking for a new way to experience it, this is a good way to go. You got part 1, part 2. This is largely Link as a kid, then I think towards the end of this one, he jumps ahead to when he's an adult, and you'll continue the story to the end of it as adult Link. I do always recommend these if someone's looking to just have a new way to experience the story, something you can snuggle up to in bed and just kind of kick on some Zelda music and, read your way through the story. Now, if you want to go and play this through official means digitally, as it stands right now, there is only one option available to you officially. Much like many other games in the series, it is on Nintendo's online service for the Switch. The N64, you can only get that with the more expensive tier. That would be the Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack. Now, instead of $20 a year for an individual, this will be $50 a year for an individual. Kind of a steep price hike in my opinion, but that does get you Game Boy Advance, it gets you the N64, it gets you Sega Genesis, and it also gets you some expansion packs for some existing games. Like for example, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, Animal Crossing, Splatoon 2. They give you the DLC. As long as you stay subscribed, you get full access to the DLC for those games as well. Now, I will say, it'll feel a bit weird playing it with Switch controls or even a Pro controller, because the game was clearly not designed with these controllers in mind. I believe you use this as the C buttons, and everything just feels a little off when it comes to N64 games on the Switch. Now, because of this, Nintendo did release their N64 controller. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it. I think the price is way too high. Its functionality is limited largely to just the N64 app on here, and they are a true pain in the ass to get a hold of, with many people scalping them on eBay for hundreds of dollars. Now, there is the Retro Brawler. I believe it's called the Retro Brawler 64. It gives you kind of the N64 feel, but remodels the N64 controller to feel a little bit more modern, and they do have a wireless option that will sync up with the Switch, and it is also usable with a lot more games outside of just the N64 stuff. So from a personal recommendation, I would probably go that route, because I figure if you're going to spend that type of money, I would say you'd want that controller to be usable with as much stuff as possible. And I believe they have a wireless adapter for the N64 as well, so if you still have your original hardware, that's probably going to be your best bet. Now, Ocarina of Time is largely considered one of the best games of all time. I absolutely understand why. But personally, oddly enough, it does not rank in my top 5. As I said, my experience with it was a little bit more muted because of Mystical Ninja. I still love the game. I still think it's a stone cold classic and everybody should play it. I just look at it a bit more objectively in terms of where it sits in the pantheon. Now, one additional thing to keep in mind when it comes to Ocarina of Time. Anybody who knows anything about the Zelda timeline knows that it splits in 3 different directions. And those 3 different directions are entirely based on this one game. This is the pivot point of the entire Zelda timeline. Now, when it comes to completing Ocarina of Time, based on what happens at the end, the timeline branches off in 3 directions. So after completing this, you could move on to Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask, or Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker, and you would be correct in any one of those directions. It's absolutely fascinating, I love it, and I can't get enough of it. Now, if you're a Zelda fan, I would genuinely love to hear from you in terms of your experience with Ocarina of Time. Is it a favorite of yours? When did you play it in your life? Do you still revisit it to this day? Please share in the comments down below. If you like this video and you'd like to see more, please subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you guys later.